Okay, so it's still good morning. So good
Good
morning
morning.
and a very, very warm welcome to each one of you. And let me start by thanking each one of you for sparing your valuable time on a Saturday morning, and especially for the corporate sector. And I know how much Dr. Vinay also keeps busy. So I think that shows our love and regard for both SPORE and FWA. Indeed, I would say, when I was looking at the panel of speakers and all our panelists, I should say that I thought really I am fortunate enough. Our audience is fortunate enough to have a galaxy of expert speakers today, and it will be a good learning experience for each one of us to be sharing our views, to be learning from each other. And, in any case, I feel that this session, has so many high sounding words. And, whether you talk of the NEP, you talk of LTI, you talk of Atmanirbharta, each one of them, I should say, is a document in itself. In fact, every time I read the new education policy, there is something new which comes up. There's a new learning which comes up. And yes, we are extremely and extremely grateful to both FWA and FORE for giving us this platform to express our views on this very informative and dynamic area. Uh, the point of convergence between NEP, FDI, and the policy of Atmanirbharta is what we at this moment need. In fact, the events in the last 10, 11 months have shown us that, we need to reorient ourselves. And we keep asking ourselves, what is the new normal? Should we reorient? Should we reset? And I'm sure we heard these discussions which say, please don't reorient, reset your thinking, reset your outlook. Going forward, the format of our discussion today would be that, I would start by introducing each of our very respected panelists. I'll start by giving my brief introductory remarks, and I'm going to really make them brief, and then request each of the panelists to uh, give their thoughts and express their views for about 4 to 5 minutes. Once all the panelists have expressed their views, uh, there are a few questions, and, the whole purpose and the aim of these questions will be to draw out the theme of the session today. And then finally, in the last 10, 15 minutes, we could uh, throw open the floor for our audience to give them an opportunity to ask, specific questions, what they have been thinking about, to help us understand the challenges on these three important areas which are under discussion today. So let me start by introducing our panelists. In fact, my request would be that, when each panelist expresses their views, they could maybe devote 30 seconds to, giving a little brief about themselves. So we have Professor Vinay Jatta, who's a very dear friend also, let me say, and who's a very senior professor at the Ford School of Management. Then we have Avidesh Dikshitji. I always love his background. His background is very enterprising. He's the Chief Human Resource Officer at Acuity Knowledge Partners. In fact, I've been with him in a session earlier. Then we have Harjeet Khanduja ji, who's the Vice President HR at Reliance Jio. Reliance Jio is always in the news for all the good reasons. So it'll be good to hear from Harjeet ji, his views. Then we have Sandeep Tyagi. Again, we are fortunate to have him, who's the Director HR at Samsung Electronics. Then we have Saswati Sinha, who's again been with me in another webinar, and it's always a delight hearing her views. So welcome once again, Saswati, who's the Head Human Resources. And then we have Shalu Menon, who's the VP HR Transformation Chamber. And I've heard that Shalu is a great speaker. So I think the galaxy of speakers, before it leaves me speechless, let me just give, my very brief opening remarks and then hand it over to our panelists. NEP, FDI, and Atmanirbharta. This is really, central to the well-being of a nation and a society, and to any society. We may not have understood the linkages between all three of them, but COVID, or the pandemic as we call it, has told us how completely interwoven, public health and the economy are interlinked. Okay, my video is not started. Okay, sorry about this. So, how COVID and the public health system and the economy are linked. Here, let me just make one or two quick points. We talk about the private healthcare system, we talk about the public healthcare system. And each one of us, would prefer the private healthcare system. So the private healthcare system has more resources, has more facilities, has more doctors, has more, I'm not saying well qualified, has more doctors, I'm saying it has more hospital beds. But during the pandemic, it was the public healthcare system, it was the public hospitals who came to the rescue of the patient. Please remember, this pandemic is or was not like any other pandemic. This was a very, very special pandemic because there was a human element involved. There's a human life involved. And hence, the public healthcare system, let me put it like this, was bearing the brunt of the pandemic. And I don't know whether to put it because this is what we heard and this is what we read. The private sector more or less was trying to play it safe. I am not saying it was neglecting the humanitarian perspective, but they were trying to play it a little more safe. That is one issue which I would flag off with, for our discussion today. To achieve Atmanirbharta, which is, a policy perspective, which is something which is being emphasized by our Prime Minister at all forums, we will need to incentivize innovation, research, and development in India. Now, how do we do that? You could do that by setting up, I should say, global centers in India. There are, a lot of these centers which have come up, we have seen, but the important dimension here is that in the recent budget 2021, our respected finance minister has given the right or I would say the due importance to research and innovation, and an amount of rupees 50,000 crore to be spent over a period of 5 years. I would say this is absolutely essential and important for our ecosystem. The academic community uh, realizes how important research and development is for the development of any country. In fact, even at all academic forums, we give a lot of importance to teaching, we give a lot of importance to research, and uh, as of now, the scenario is both of them tend to go together. Uh, Here, you know, how do we decide, what sectors and, picking up sectors, I would say. Uh, Here, my view, and I'm purely saying it's my view here, is that, uh, when you choose sectors, whether for innovation, whether for research, whether for development, a lot of times the focus, the motivation is you choose sectors, let's say like a manufacturing, which has a lot of focus on employment. It's right. You need to give employment the right focus. But till you choose sectors or till you focus on, I would say, manufacturing products for the consumers which are globally competitive, which are high quality, the consumer will not be satisfied. So have a right blend, have a right mix of keeping in view the employment perspective and the consumer perspective. Because uh, unless we have a blend or a balance of the two, uh, we will not be able to succeed here. So the policy making here needs to focus on these two very important dimensions. Let me talk very briefly here on the new education policy. The new education policy, let me say, has come at a very, very appropriate time. It has got a good vision for school, and that is the starting point. It's a creative step, it's a good initiative. Let me just highlight two or three important perspectives from this new education policy. The focus of our new education policy is on transdisciplinary, skill set, hands-on experience, and breaking down barriers between subjects. It could be a science, it could be engineering, it could be, a medicine. Now, uh, the policy talks of the curriculum being cross-functional, multidisciplinary, and holistic. Let me just give a perspective from the corporate sector here. The business problems facing organizations are rarely one-dimensional. So if the business problems are rarely one-dimensional, how can solutions be unidirectional? So it is in that context, our teaching in a B school has to be cross-functional. And let me put it as cross-functional is the key towards innovation problem solving. And this is a step towards Atmanirbharta. So, the whole move in the NEP is towards setting the right balance, which which helps us to start our own ventures, help us develop our entrepreneurial skills, help us develop startups, and that is what is the whole initiative. In fact, it is being suggested in the new education policy that this is the best opportunity for universities to create curriculum around the challenges being faced by the society. And let me put it very straightforwardly, because, as a part of a B school, we always used to hear that, oh, I mean, okay, fortunately, not in our B school, but otherwise, you do hear the students are not industry ready. The students cannot be placed immediately in the market. The point here is that successful universities, successful B schools, successful programs all need to listen to the market and its problem. Whether it's environment, whether it's global warming, whether it's transportation, whether it's pollution, whether it's artificial intelligence, whether it's machine learning. I mean, you could rattle off all of them. Now that is an important dimension, which again I would like to re-emphasize and refocus. If you go back a little history, you'll find all the successful universities like a Harvard and a Stanford and an Oxford, they all developed when the government gave them a free hand. So I would say that this is the best opportunity for universities in India to develop a holistic and multidisciplinary approach. And towards this end, the NEP is a move in the right direction. Very quickly here, let me mention about the two important stakeholders in NEP. The two important stakeholders here are the professors and the students. It's important to change the mindset of both. Let me start with the professors. The faculty, the teachers also have to be motivated to think cross-functional, so you have to first reorient them. In fact, this is a challenge for the whole country because, you need to change the mindset of our faculty. How do you do that? In fact, let me borrow a term from the manufacturing sector. We keep hearing a lot about design thinking. Now, there was a time when design thinking, it was thought was only applicable to the manufacturing sector. But no, the whole focus in the design thinking approach is that it's a solution-oriented approach. And why can't we employ, or why can't we, innovate ourselves to adopt some new innovative thinking, which, ultimately gets reflected in our students. So the point here is that since a lot of our faculty, we have been trained in a little more traditional manner, it is very important for us to understand and grasp the meaning of transdisciplinary, project-based learning, and how knowledge can be linked to entrepreneurial activity. The important thing as professors, and the onus lies on us, let me say, we have to discourage rote learning. Okay? And this is what has been emphasized in the new policy also. The other stakeholder is our student. I would say the students ultimately will gain. We link ourselves to the market, so the students will definitely gain, from this multidisciplinary approach, focus on arts, Indian culture, language. Let me just put it in a simple line. Whatever innovation you do, whether it's a new education policy or with any other policy, what is important is what students can do at the end of the program. And for doing that, it's important to understand the heart of our students. And this policy will help us achieve those objectives. Before I close, very quickly, a line on the foreign direct investment. Ultimately, the initiatives which have always been there in the FDI, it's there to boost the economy, help the business environment to prosper. The focus is to, develop domestic capacity so that we become self-reliant. And that is where we would like to move towards. In fact, the pandemic uh, has resulted in a permanent reshaping of our mindset, or at least I would say our behavior. And that is where, we need to give, a lot of opportunities, let me say, to the various sunrise sectors, so that uh, important foreign capital flow into the country. So, let me just mention here, the contract which has been signed between Facebook and Geo, which is a multi-billion-dollar, investment, and which is proof of the faith the foreign investors have in India. Let me stop here, and I'll invite the panelists, and we will look forward to a fruitful discussion on this very interesting area. So thank you so much for giving me a patient learning. Can I start by inviting Shalu Menon, if she is here? Shalu, can we hear your views?
Yeah. Hi, Dr. Madhu. I'm here.
Can you
hear me?
Yeah, I can, Shalu.
Okay. So firstly, Dr. Madhu, I think all the points that you've said are very pertinent. And in a way, you've summarized what I believe is the crux of these three streams coming together and creating value for our country, for our people, for us as individuals and professionals. Personally, I think we've been on a journey of change for some time. And there were certain foundational things that the country embarked on in the 5 to 7 years, which kind of came to a point where pandemic, I believe, is a blessing in disguise for the economic and the innovative acceleration that it has caused. Now, when I say economic, I'm mindful of the fact that, we did shrink last year, right? And given the fact that 50% of our GDP comes from informal sector, while we might say formal sector shrunk by 10%, the impact for people who are operating fundamentally in the informal section is far higher. So I do not for once underestimate the effort that it will take for us to rebuild. But the interesting green shoots, if I may call them, are a couple of them linked to the three streams that you refer to. And I'll focus a lot more on Atmanirbhar Bharat as balanced by what it takes to be Atmanirbhar, right? One is the spirit of being inventive, being innovative, and being jugadu, right? That's how we have all grown up. If you think about it, Indians per se think of ways to make things happen. And that is not because we are just special and different. It's just the way we have grown up as a country, right? 73 years of independence, how have we grown? And if you look at statistics, we are the largest democracy in the world. We are also what, 2.69 trillion economy, $1 trillion economy, and our aspiration is to become 5 trillion. If I look at the pandemic, forced many people to do things which we never thought we can do, right? And from the remotest part of our country, people have thought differently and done stuff. But the good news is this, that the foundational investments that were started in terms of financial services, think about the Jan Dhan Yojana, the whole linkage of bank accounts to Aadhaar, the whole acceptance of the fact that UPI driven virtual IDs can be used to do financial transaction. Now, on the face of it, look very basic, but for a country of our scale, which needed, by the way, the last 12 months in a very challenging environment, needed us to learn new ways of doing things, suddenly changed and accelerated how we operate. And I guess somewhere this whole spirit of saying that we are the vaccine hub of the world, but also the action which the government has stepped up and supported the industry, the current budget, the focus of how we are putting policy changes to make sure that, deep inside the world beyond the metros is engaging, and everybody does not have to necessarily be only in the urban area to find a probability to make economic sustenance for themselves. I think the spirit and direction is in the right place. I guess when I think about it from an education standpoint, firstly, I think the transformation in education was long waiting. We should have done this maybe 20 years back. Now, when I think about our spirit of being independent, and I think the people of our country have to be skilled correctly, and Dr. Madhu, you spoke about design thinking, and it's very close to my heart. I believe if people can be taught how you can solve your own problems in a human-centered way, in a way that is far more inclusive and far more sustainable, your ability to take results to fruition is far higher. So you spoke about certain key parameters. Three things that stood out in the NEP for me personally, that I think is directly going to impact the spirit of being Atmanirbhar is first community participation. You know, the whole aspect of saying it is all of us together. How do we instill the spirit of philanthropy, patriotism, and self-discipline in the way our children are groomed and prepared for future? And the second thing that stood out was the inordinate focus on how do you focus on conceptual understanding, creative thinking, ability to analyze a situation, break it into problems that are achievable, yet address those problems in a mindset of inclusion and taking people together. I think is very powerful because it fundamentally challenges this mindset that, okay, you prepare from a question paper, cheat sheet, and just answer and you will pass through. But marks don't say that you will have employability or good employment opportunity in future. So I feel those fundamental changes are going to change the skills our people have as they grow. They will probably inspire entrepreneurship far more than otherwise. And I have always maintained this, that India and our future cannot be driven by management principles which are designed, developed in the Western world. We have to contextualize them to our world, and hence the mixing of subjects, if I can call it in a very layman terms, right? The ability to choose a science along with a humanities subject and ability to then see the convergence of the two can probably allow far more, how do I put it, far more creative ways that children will be able to make their own financial independence, but take the society along. So those are the couple of things that stood out for me every time I think about Atmanirbhar Bharat in the context of how are we preparing the skills for this Atmanirbhar Bharat, right? So those stand out for me, Dr. Ved.
Okay. Shalu, as very rightly I had heard, you know, I have a lot of students in GenPack and I have, you know, my own relations in GenPack. And when they saw your name, they said, oh my, very good speaker. Shalu, yes, you have highlighted one important issue which even I had forgotten, and that's the word creative pandemic. And I would also like to highlight that, you know, scenarios like this, situations like this, give us an opportunity to rethink and how best we can make use of this situation. So, you know, we did it in the global financial crisis. What are the learnings? Proactive learning. And that's what, Shalu, I would like to really credit you with. Creative pandemic. So every scenario, every situation we are in, we try to take the best and move forward. So thank you, Shalu, for your, learnings here, and good. And I'm sure the audience would have really benefited here. So let me go to my next speaker and request Professor Vinay Datta ji, who's a very good friend also, to share his views. Professor Vinay Datta, are you there? Okay.
I think you're on mute, sir.
Am I audible?
Yes. Yeah, now you are. Now you are.
Okay. So nice to be with Madhuji, in my senior from SRCC, and always, supporting in every endeavor, whatever we have. So I will be very brief, and I'll just pick up 3 or 4, very small, anecdotes, as well as some very linkages words, rhythmic words, and then I'll try to talk on what exactly I have to say. So first thing is, what exactly do we mean by NEP, okay, new education policy? And if we go back into the education per se itself, okay, so there are three things which have always been, the cornerstones of education, both at school as well as at higher education level. The first is conceptualize, the second is actualize, and third is realize. So if we go into the basics of the higher education or any education, it speaks about three things. When I say conceptualize, we are talking ability or learn to know, okay, which means the basic theoretical aspect, okay. So that has been the focus in our colleges, our universities and school, and that's why they always use the term sage on stage. The somebody is talking and others are just hearing as if some sermon is going on, okay. And never ever there have been much emphasis on actualization, which means learn to do, the functional aspect. Okay, that is where we say in this education policy, now they are talking about campus to corporate approach. Because when we link education from the corporate perspective, okay, there they say everything is fine. But if the person who is coming, he does not have the ability, okay, to achieve targeted goal or apply whatever he has learned, okay, in the real life situation, then he is not employable. And that is where there has been always a gap between the college and the campus as well as the corporates. The third part is realize. No, looking from the governance perspective today, okay, when we say realize, we say learn to be the value system. Okay, so we are only creating managers, but we are not creating good human beings. So to my mind, when this education policy have touched all the three things, okay, it is focusing on conceptualization, it is focusing on actualization, and it is also focusing on realization. So from governance purposes, we need to prepare future managers who have this multi-dimensional approach. Okay, they should not only know how to write in the exam, as I think Ms. Shalu also mentioned. Okay, so what does it mean? So second concept I'm talking about is think, link, ink. Okay, so what does it mean? It means if our education policy is not, forcing, compelling students, okay, to think logically, think critically, okay, then what is it we are doing as a institutions, okay? And we are always failing in that perspective because our emphasis always has been on getting a degree rather than getting a successful actual business manager who can apply the knowledge in the real life situation. And link means context. Okay, so second thing is, it is not only you should think logically and critically, you should think depending on the context. And that is where the multidimensional approach to education, which is emphasized in this policy, is helpful. And ink, because see, everywhere today we live where there is a accountability. Even in this new policy, they have talked about, few aspects. They have talked about access. They say access is reach. Like earlier, we talk of financial inclusion. Now, in this policy, they are talking of education inclusivity. And that's why they're talking of, setting up these tribal schools and other issues. Okay. So second is equity, which means the curriculum should be such, whether it is private or public schools, okay, everywhere it should be same, okay, so that there should not be gaps. We are creating gaps, okay. And third is the quality aspect, and fourth is affordability and accountability. And that's where they say it should be aligned to 2030 agenda for sustainable development. So our ability to think, to link, okay, and ink is very important. Now the next concept I'm talking about is, since professors and teachers are the, again, most important stakeholders, okay, and they are not updating, so that is why I use acronym. I say there are learned professors and there are learning professors. Unfortunately, in India, we have created learned professors and learned teachers, okay, who have stopped learning. So they have not changed with the time. So in this policy specifically, okay, they are talking about how to update teachers and professors. See, how can we create industry ready, future managers if we ourselves are not prepared, okay, to embrace new things? So that is where there is a lacuna in the system. And in this policy, they have talked about that. Now, from the policy perspective, I put it under three categories. The first is academic, regulation, and administration. It is in this context they are talking about Higher Education Commission, and which will focus on, okay, four aspects: standard setting, accreditation, regulation, and funding of colleges and universities. So essentially, see, we are a resource constrained country. So if there are multiple regulations are there, so half of the time you find in the colleges and university, rather than focusing on their core activity, which is imparting learning, okay, they are focusing more on meeting the compliance and other requirements. So that is where we have to understand that this kind of a higher education commission of India is necessity in India, because that way the professors and the colleges will be able to devote more time on their core activity. And I always say, whenever I talk to the students, see, and I wrote one article in the which came in the Financial Express, and it was these schools are uh, placement agencies or temples of learning. What are we doing? Okay, so the question is, our focus is more on output rather than on the input. So in this policy, that's why they say you focus also initially on this multidimensional approach so that students are industry ready. Second aspect is academic collaboration. Okay, so that is where the role of FDI and others will come in that sense. And the third aspect is the academic delivery and academic curriculum. So our curriculum should be such, okay, which creates willingness to learn among students, then ability to absorb and remember, and third is ability to retrieve and reproduce whatever has been learned when they apply it in the real life situation. I recollect that famous ad of Hero Honda, which says, fill it, shut it, and forget it. But the way we have to look at education, okay, it is not just fill it, it is fill it, retrieve it, learn, relearn it, okay, and remember it. So that's the way we have to focus. And of course, the most important is, are we able to motivate students, okay, to become a lifelong learners? That attitude, which is very, very important. Now, coming to the FDI, once we know we are resource constrained, and all experts have suggested that 6% of the GDP, okay, is what has to be the budgetary allocation. But let us look at in the last 5 years, we are always below, 4%. So once we know that we are resource constrained, okay, do we have options? Okay, of course, money is coming, but most of the money which is coming right now is coming in the informal, which is called edge tech sector, rather than into this. So for creating infrastructure, we do need FDI. And FDI, again, why people are not coming, why they are having some kind of constraints? Because most of the higher education or education in India is on non-profit basis. And then the problem is non-profit can make surplus, but redistribution of profit is not allowed. So when some investor want, that is why some policy changes has to be done in FDI policy, so that people who are investing purely from investment perspective shall be able to repatriate, which is right now not allowed. Of course, FDI is allowed under auto route in India in education sector. Now coming to last part, Atmanirbhar Bharat. The way I look at it, okay, self-reliance. Okay, see, the question is, most of the people think that we are talking of self-isolation. See, see, when we say Atmanirbharta or self-reliance, what we are trying to say is that we have to embrace global practices, though we are in India, and then we have to, as Shalu said, we have to then relate it with the Indian conditions, context. So what is relevant in the other part of the world may not be relevant to India, but it does not mean that we cannot embrace the global practices. And it is in that context, okay, they have used the term going global. Okay, so top-rated global universities should be facilitated to come to India, and top Indian institutions should be encouraged to go overseas. So this is with this kind of a small, my inputs on the topic. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Professor Vinadatta for your very clear and articulate views. And yes, you very rightly said that we also need to constantly upgrade and learn. Thank you so much. Let me now invite Sandeep Tyagiji from Samsung Electronics to share his views briefly.
Yeah, good afternoon, madam. I'm also from FMS, so great to see you.
Hi.
Yeah, great to see you.
Yeah,
So,
thank you.
a very warm good afternoon to all the panelists here and to the dear students of Core School. So, National Education Policy 2020 is a very progressive step in line of uniformity in the education sector, more technological advancement, and as Shalu said about bringing design thinking, critical thinking, analytics. So those are some issues which have been really focused upon. So the key highlights which I find very interesting in this new education policy is focus on e-learning. So e-learning is going to be a game changer for a huge country like India, where online learning will provide access to everyone, whether sitting in nook and corner of the country, to access education. The second very big thing which I really appreciate about this policy is on focus on assessment. So it's not an assessment just based on marks. In fact, marks will get much lower. It's more assessment on the competencies. So whether a student is studying till 8th class, 10th class, or a 12th class, he has the flexibility to move out in areas of his vocation. So vocational education will be very key part of new education policy. So I think these three aspects related to technology, assessment, and making education a very uniform structure are the three key highlights of national education policy. And of course, then there is an overarching one single umbrella body which is being planned to create to replace multiplicity of institutions. So you have UGC, CBSCs, all kind of, and sometimes they do not work in one direction. So one overarching umbrella organization will provide a lot of uniformity to the education system. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Sandeep ji. That was really short and sweet, and you presented your very clear and unambiguous views on, the session today. Let me now invite Avadesh Dikshit ji to share his views.
Thank you, ma'am. Am I audible, Professor Madhu?
Yes, you are. You are. Thank you.
Okay. First of all, thank you for inviting me here, and also for complimenting my background. You can imagine that majority of the people what kind of zone we are in over the weekend. So that represents a zone that we belong to, and only a person of Shiv's caliber can get us out of that zone. Over the weekend.
Honestly, yes.
So thank you for that. Having said that, see, I think couple of points. The issue is that a lot of us are speaking on the same subject, so there would be overlap. So my apologies for that. But having said that, I can give you some perspective on what I really like about this entire policy, and also what I feel could be some of the challenges. Because it's not going to be easy. I remember, and I think people like Shalu and Saswati would recall that for several decades we have been discussing this whole campus to corporate, and also for several decades, we have been discussing if people are employable by the industry or no. So, having said that, I think from an intent perspective and from a policy perspective, this is a fantastic move, as far as the national education policy is concerned. And I would like to give due weightage and due, I would say, applause to the people who created this policy. As as I said, from an intention and policy perspective, you can't get better than this. So that's one. Even if I'm repeating myself, let me tell you what I really like about. There are certain aspects which really stand out as far as the policy is concerned. See, offering flexibility of what you want to do, I think is a game changer. You can combine science with commerce, and you can combine commerce with arts. Is a great idea. And also, I think in a sense it is also very empowering and very inclusive, because you don't want a situation where students from science stream believe that they are the ones who are more intelligent, and studying English literature is less important. So when you're trying to mix the extreme streams, where a student can learn English literature along with physics, chemistry, maths, I think it's a game-changing idea. And also it takes away this whole guilt from a large number of students who may feel that studying commerce and arts is not as as important as studying science. So that's one. Secondly, I think flexibility in terms of timing, that you can complete 1 year and you have some credits, then you can complete 2 years and you get a whatever diploma, and then you complete 3 years and you get a degree, and then you complete 4 years and you become eligible for PhD. I think this kind of a flexibility where somebody can drop out of the education system because of whatever constraints, especially in rural areas or semi-urban areas, there are chances that because of some kind of personal situation, you are not able to go beyond 2 years, and the policy, at least the framework, offers you to resume your education and then carry forward some kind of credits. I think this is a game changer again, in my view. And then I think Professor Vinay Datta was talking about, and you also mentioned, ma'am, and I guess Shalu also mentioned. I think the kind of emphasis that the policy makes on vocational skills is much desired. And as I said, for 20 years, we've been talking about the kind of skill gap between academics, what get taught and what we need in industry. So, I would be very keen to see how this whole vocational skills, and also if you look at the, the Prime Minister's address on this subject, he spoke about 21st century skills. And there's a lot of literature which is available on 21st century skills. And I'm very pleased to see that even if you can have, 50% of those skills being imparted through new education policy, that's going to be very interesting. And then there is a talk about common regulator. You need it, AICTE, UGC. I don't know how many bodies do we have who are governing the education system of this country. So if there is a one single regulator, my view is that it's going to be quite helpful, and I'm not going to get into details of it because Professor Datta already covered it. Now, as far as two more items. One, this whole integrated report card thing is also a very interesting concept. I guess probably Shalu was talking about it, that you get weightage for like more holistic development, which includes vocational skills, what you learn, and in terms of your extracurricular activities, sports activities. So if a student is being presented with a more integrated report card, and that is being emphasized, I'm hoping, I don't know, I'm not sure, but I'm hoping that that's going to be at least igniting people to be going beyond only academics. So integrated report card mechanism that NEP talks about is a very interesting concept to my mind. Finally, what is it? So this is one, and I'll be very quick in terms of just passing on only one message, which I would like to pass on is this, that is last several decades we've been talking about. Now I want to be a little critical, having praised the policy very much. My only worry comes from the mechanism of implementation, to be honest with you. How are you going to implement something so ambitious? I have not even seen a prototype for that matter. When I say prototype, is there a prototype school which is going to, experiment this? And Shalu would agree that we are very fond of prototypes before we go full-fledged, So I would be very keen to see, is there a prototype school or there is a prototype college which can be launched and that can demonstrate to rest of the educational institutions and the ecosystem as to how do you go about implementing this policy. Otherwise, let me tell you, another 20 years from now, we would be discussing the same subject. Campus to corporate skills, seat on the table and all those kind of things. That's one. My final thought, which is a silver lining here, is that I'm very excited about this whole skills university. And why am I telling you is that I really wish that apart from the Delhi government, which has already initiated Skills University, I think the campus is going to come up and they've already appointed the Vice Chancellor and the Board of Governors. And there's another Skills University probably, which is being floated in public-private partnership in Haryana. And some of you who are in the corporate sector, you are aware that Team Lees already have a skills and vocational university. But the problem is that you can count them on your fingers. The Team Lees universities has been only functional for a couple of years. Delhi's Skills University I think is taking shape now. If you really want to make NEP functional and you really want to implement it, model it around what some of these skills universities are trying to do. Can there be a skills college? Can there be a skills school? On the similar lines like Skills University. So I would end by, Professor Madhu, I would end by saying that great move, great intention, great policy initiative. It is from a policy perspective, it's like dream come true. But how do you make it functional and how do you make it implementation? I'm going to watch this space. They are talking about early 2022 for the school part of the NEP to be rolled out. So I'm keeping a very close watch on it. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Avdeshji, for your very important, clear and unambiguous views here. You're very right, because yes, the NEP is a game changer, but very rightly pointed out by you, and I share your views here, that sometimes a policy can create pitfalls, like one size fits all. So I think the proof here is how the policy is implemented. So the per se, the reading part is good. In terms of its structure, it's well laid out. But if implemented properly, we can expect nothing but good from the policy. But yes, I do agree with you that it's the implementation part which will determine its success going forward. Can we now request Saraswati Sinha, Head Human Resources, to give her views?
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for having me in this forum. And in the interest of time, because we have other speakers, I'll be very, very quick. Yeah. So like Avdesh said, and we keep discussing a lot of topics. So, and more or less we fight and then we align. So like he said, I'll go with that. And I'll give the corporate example to the implementation part.
Saraswati, sorry to interrupt you. You and I fight and you win. I just wanted to say,
no way.
I just wanted to say this record state. Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Okay. So okay. So what he's saying is the implementation part. So for example, we can bring in a change through a tsunami. And we can bring in a change with little interventions, which is actually not a tsunami. Honestly, right now, all these feel like a tsunami. Because, you are thinking of changing the whole mindset. In the corporate world, pandemic accelerated a lot of things for us. But Sandeep is here. And he would also agree with me that the Samsung group is a tech group. It's a digital group. We are ahead in technology. But still for the last 3-4 years, we have been able to do digital transformation inside our organizations also. It is not so easy. The pandemic brought forward a lot of stuff. We were all working from home. But one person sitting in, take my hometown, Guwahati, is not able to have internet connection. I'm sorry to say. We were not ready with the internet connection. What will my e-learning module do? What will my other policies do which is facilitating him to work from home? It didn't work. So then we had to think of a lot of innovative other ways of doing it. So honestly, I think the thought is visionary. It is very progressive. The Western world has cracked it, has got it done, has implemented it. But we have also done it. For example, private educational institutes, I'm talking about the NEP policy, private education institutes have IB, International Vernacular Curriculum, and they have CBSE, they have ICSE. So there are differences there. The IB is more about, skill, vocation, you can choose, you can learn at your own pace. There are a lot of Indian schools also who had come up with that. But has that caught on? Has that been successful? Or are they just to get an admission? So one has to, think all these through. You are talking about teachers. For example, again, I'll take the corporate example. We are saying that the people have to reorient themselves to become relevant and stay employable. If these are the two things we have been telling people, the people who do not have the digital skill sets like the millennials and the Gen Zs, they need to quickly learn because otherwise they will become redundant. We have been giving them all kinds of inputs and all kinds of help and support to learn and upskill. But in spite of that, 30% of them are failing. 30%, it's a huge number. What do we do with them? Should we drop them on the roadside? The same way in implementation, when you are talking of reorientation, teachers, students, everybody has been for decades brought up in a certain way, taught in a certain way. If they're unable to do the catch-up game, what do you do with them? One cannot just say like the Lakshman Sylvania ad, Sare ghar ke badal dalo, within 3 years. It's a whole, Swadeshi is not, now let's come to Atmanirbhar. Swadeshi is our pride. And it started from Swadeshi Andolan. It's not a new concept. But if I look at it, when I was going through it, I'll just give you a little perspective. The regulatories in India, the regulations are so huge that it is so difficult for even a small entrepreneur to pick up 500 people and set up one plant. He has to go through 23 licenses and registration, more than 60 laws, 750 compliances, 120 filings a day. It's humongous. The way the framework has been, can we change it in 3 years? Are we even thinking that what regulatory stuff we need to change to facilitate Atmanirbharta? Now, so even the Indian entrepreneurs, the youngsters who are picking up, doing startups, they're doing it so that they can scale it up and then they can sell it off. How many Indian startups are independently reaching that height? Very few. They scale it up and then they give it away. So that has been happening. So one, very good, everything is Atmanirbhar, good. We are not new to it and we should do it to stay ahead of the game. FDI, great, but FDI in education should not be a process for getting, again, facilitating brain drain. One needs to think through it. Then comes our NEP. NEP promotes employability, fantastic. At the ground level, we should do it. But then what do we do with another a billion of people or the infrastructure, which might not be able to enable it? So are we doing the enablers right? I think is what we need to think right now as a society, as a community. We cannot just, government has to think about it. I think that's very wrong. One has to think. I'll give another small example. I'll give our corporate example. Scale India does CSR in education, girl child education. It's called Mary Class. We work with Teach for India. And we pick up MCD schools and we provide cabs, technology, we provide the devices, we provide the internet connection, and we adopt classroom and we facilitate Teach for India teachers to teach the girl child. We do that. We spend crores in it. Samsung does at a much bigger scale. We do at a smaller scale, but we are doing it. Has the government ever facilitated it? It is so difficult. We tied up with Teach for India simply because it is so difficult to get that one license to go into a MCD school and impart education. One has to really think this through and not just jump into it. It's the same as any organization. We have to think through whether we want to implement technology everywhere or in one area, two area, three area, like every organization is doing in today's time due to the pandemic, especially because that's a different disruption. I think we all together as a community, along with the government, has to be very, very clear to the goal, objective, short term, long term, and then facilitate and look at incumbents which will come in and then figure out the right way to do it. I think, but if you are able to do it, I think nobody can stop us. We will just crack the code globally.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
So thank you, Shalu, for your, for your
Hey,
views.
Shashwati, you just can't forget
sorry.
Shalu. No worries.
Shashwati.
No, Shalu takes over. We all know.
No. Shashwati, but it was a delight hearing to your views, and I'm feeling so happy that in all your discussions, you are the one who wins when it's a discussion with Avadesh. So keep it up, So that's the good point. Yeah, I would. Sorry, but I'm feeling very proud of Shashwati. Yeah. Let me finally request Harjeet ji, our speaker, who I've heard is a great public speaker. He's a great orator, and we'll all wait to learn to his views on this very important, in this very important session on FDI, NEP, and Atmanirbharta. So over to you, Harjeet ji.
Thank you, Madhuji. Shiv called me and he told me that there is a program at 4, you have to come and you have to speak, and it is FWA program, so you can't say no. I said, okay, Shiv, if that is what you want, I will do that. And then he sent me the topic. And I read that topic 3 days back. It said NEP, and it talked about FDI, and it talked about last 3 nights I did not sleep. I was reading these documents and I made pointers. And then Madhuji, you came. And whatever points I made, you line by line stated all those items. And after that, with all these speakers, now I am not left with what to impart. But what I will do is, I will say the same things which you guys have said, but in my own style.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It'll be a delight. It'll be a delight hearing. Yeah.
So, first thing to all the participants, like students would have been there. So, students, if you are thinking that this policy is going to change anything for you, frankly speaking, I read that 66-page policy. It talked about that this will happen in 2035, this will happen in 2040, and the nearest date which can impact you is 2025. So frankly speaking, this is not going to impact you. What we are talking about is how we make future better for all of us, for entire country, how we think as a nation. No, there is one thing I will tell you which this policy helps all of us, or how it will help all of us in some way. Look, I was there in this lockout. So when Mahatma Gandhi was in lockout, what did he do? He wrote a book. Was in jail. He wrote a book. So when I was in jail, basically lockout, so I also wrote a book. And for writing a book and publishing a book, I had to study a lot, like how this entire market works. This is one important aspect which this policy talks about, which is lifelong learning. And this is part of SDG 4. You would have heard about sustainability goals. So This is in line with those sustainability goals. And look, lifelong learning is very, very important. Uh, in my house, I am respected. Means I was respected, I should say. I was respected to the core for one thing. There was one thing which no one else could do in the house, and that whenever that used to happen, I felt so proud of myself. That was changing the cylinder. So whenever cylinder was supposed to be changed, means the respect significantly goes up. And you know what happened? They had put a gas pipeline in my society. So all the respect, all that skill which I had, that went for a toss. But I did not give up. I learned a new skill, how to make breakfast. You know what happened? Then Swiggy came. Point I'm trying to make is, you might be underestimating that lifelong learning is something which is not important. In this period, which is going to come in future, moving from one skill to another is very, very important. You can't say that I have done MBA or I have done graduation, so it is going to help me for life. Skills are going to change. You have to upgrade yourself with the skills. So that is one very important aspect. And before this meeting started, so Shalu and I were discussing. So we were saying people are going out. They just announced that vaccine has come, and everyone is thinking that everyone is vaccinated. We as a society live on hope. So this new policy has come. It has opened our minds that something beautiful is going to happen, and that is what we have started exhibiting in our behavior. Somebody was writing in comments in the chat window. Everyone is praising policy. That is our nature. If something good is happening, we want to embrace that. The idea of this policy is, if you see um, enrollment ratio, till 8th class, 90% people are enrolled. When it goes to 10th class, it goes to 79. When it goes to 12th class, only 50, your GER is 56%. And when it only 25%. Policy is aiming at how we bring that population who did not study, this population from 25% to 50%, say by 2035. That is what the policy is aiming at. Now let's talk about Atmanirbhar Bharat. In Atmanirbhar Bharat, the word sounds like as if we want to stop all trade with the entire world. Suppose if I tell you, your parents also would have been telling you, stand on your own feet, become Atmanirbhar. It is not that they want you to sit in house for becoming Atmanirbhar. Is that you should not be asking for money from anyone. You should be earning your money and you should be spending your money. And for that, if you have to transact with the society outside, do that. That is what Atmanirbhar means. Like Saswati was talking about, Make in India, Swadeshi movement. There is a slight difference which Prime Minister has brought in. What he's saying is make for the world. Understand what is the baseline for this. When we say make for the world, you are basically saying increase export revenue, because moment you increase export and import comes down, then your deficit goes down. And that is what they are targeting, that physical deficit should come down. Now, I was talking to the CEO of my earlier company. So we were in Hyderabad at that point in time. So he told me, if you're hiring salespeople, hire local people. So I said, why? We believe in diversity. So why are you asking me to hire local people? He said, look, they will understand the language. Telugu is very, very important if you have to connect with customer, otherwise you will not get the customer. In this policy, what policy is talking about is we will teach you multiple languages. And they're not talking about only Indian languages. Till now, our focus was on English. So we captured US market, UK market. Now they're talking about, okay, let's talk about French, let's talk about Chinese, let's talk about Japanese, let's talk about. So if you learn those languages, then we Indians are known for spreading out and doing business. And this is something which is going to boost our export. So that will make us Atmanirbhar. The third thing which this policy has done is we have always looked down certain things as society, like in corporates also. We used to look down at work from home. No, it will not work. There was a stigma to it. Like if you tell your parents, I want to do dance, they will say, beta, padhai karo. That is more important because that is going to bring some money home. So dance is not sustainable. Nothing is, as society, we have not given enough chance to things like work from home and work like skills like dancing or arts as a subject. We have not created jobs in that area. When IGNOU started, if you still see, oh, you have done degree from IGNOU. So online degree was not given too much importance, but you have done it from Coursera. Oh, suddenly Coursera is also doing the same thing which IGNOU is doing. How come Coursera has more value? Because it has a foreign name attached to it. And that is one reason. Bring all foreign universities here so that the stigma in that sense, look, digital can happen. But if a stigma is there, digital education will not give you jobs. So as society, we are taking away that stigma. Another thing, the policy actually, this whole piece talks about MSMEs. Till now, we have been talking about, okay, this is the cream, I will educate this cream, and this is going to build the nation. That is fine. What about my base population? So the focus is, okay, you know, this YouTube and pizza, these are the two things which has spoiled or which has changed the way society works. When YouTube came, I want things at my time. I want to see half, I will see half. I want everything quick. So what this policy has done is they said, okay, we are not putting constraint on education. What we are saying is, you want to study for yourself. We are putting a graduate program. So if you exit after 1 year, we will give you a certification. If you exit after 2 years, we will give you a diploma. If you do it after 3 years, we will give you a degree. And if you do it after 4 years, we are going to give you a multidisciplinary degree. And this multidisciplinary degree has a focus on vocational skills. You also would have, when you were studying Rutherford model, you would have also thought, okay, boss, where will I apply Rutherford model? Means in which corporate you will put electrons moving from one side to another. Point is, there are certain vocational skills which have to be there. In our country, vocational education or vocational certifications are only 6%. And whereas if you see countries like South Korea, it is a. So that is the path which this policy is trying to cover. This policy is trying to include MSMEs. This policy is trying to include people with disabilities. There is one more word, SEDG, that is socio-economic disadvantage groups. It is embedding sports, it is embedding life skills. So this is a full package which has been put in front of us as a buffet. Implementation, of course, is a issue, and a lot of people have talked about it. I will tell you one of the issues which a friend of mine faced. So I was checking with him. Did your degree come? Um, so your exam happened somewhere in December. So as the result comes, so he said, no, result has not come. It is taking time. He said, okay, why it is taking time? I thought the exam was digital. He said, yeah, exam was digital. What college has done is now they are taking printout of our exam papers, and then teachers are checking it manually, and then they are scanning it and uploading it on the portal, and that is why it is taking time. So thing is, digital doesn't work just by saying that you are doing it digital. It works only if in intent you are digital. You are changing processes along with using technology. So lot depends upon us, how we carry ourselves as society, as individuals. And that is why it is important for all the students, because if you don't practice this, then the future generations will also not be able to take advantage of this policy. So with this, I will stop, and over to you, Professor.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Harjeet ji, for your complete clarity and the power in your views. And I think you have very forcefully made your point. This whole issue of Atmanirbhar Bharat is what you have very rightly pointed out, that this does not mean that we cut ourselves from the rest of the world or we adopt some protectionism policy. It rather would mean that we, like we have the potential to scale up our capability in all sectors and be globally competitive. I think that's what message is. Yes, I also had a few questions for my panelists, but before that, I think we should take up the questions which have come in the chat box. So if somebody is going to help me read the chat box, or I have read the questions, and I can just read out the question and request, would Neeraj, who's the host, read out the questions, or I can read them out? Or no? Okay, Neeraj, I can read them out, and I request any of our panel member to respond to those questions. So as I read it, there are two questions. If I've missed out anything, the others are comments. The first question, very rightly, which Harjeet ji has also pointed out in his discussion, and which is, yes, definitely, a cause of concern, is what would be the impact on the Indian higher education system on the concept of Atmanirbhar Bharat by inviting 100 foreign universities to start their operations in India? So if you want, I can repeat the question: the impact on Indian higher education system and on Atmanirbhar Bharat by inviting, a number of foreign universities to start their operations in India. So can we have some comments on that from the panelists?
Yeah. May I?
Yeah, of course, of course.
Okay, if you are lured to other countries where people are going and spending money with foreign universities for getting those foreign degrees, if we look at the top 100 schools in the world, there are no schools of India which come in top 100, or we don't have a significant presence. Now, if you have to make a significant presence, and if you are thinking of getting export from these countries, or exporting to these countries. One is bring those guys here. This space will become competitive. People who want to do from these countries, these institutes, brand names, they will be able to leverage those brand names while doing business. At the same time, quality of education in our country will improve, and more universities from our country will start appearing in that list. I believe that is the intent behind doing this. And creating competition in any industry is a good sign for making that industry boom. So I think it is a good time for education industry to boom.
Okay, anything
Can I add
else?
a few points?
Yeah, sure.
So I think Harjeet said it very nicely. One point that I want to add to it is, I believe the way the world is moving so fast, no one person has all the right answers. And collective wisdom is what will take us forward. So in the process, universities outside India who have explored and actually in spirit practice some of the things the new education policy is talking about, they come into our country, we will learn and get better in the process too. So our own operating models will evolve. And in the process, I think we will become wiser in scaling this policy to its intended levels of outcome that we want. So I really believe collaboration beyond boundaries always helps the ecosystem get better. And getting these universities in can allow that two-way exchange of ideas, and in the process, we and our citizens will benefit. So that's an add-on.
Yeah.
Dr. Madhu, I would like to add here, while it's a very welcome step and all of us are in agreement to let foreign universities also come into India, set up their campuses and provide courses. And as Harjeet said, it will give a very competitive feel to our domestic institutions of learning. So also along with that, we would like to see some Indian institutes of eminence go abroad and set up their campuses abroad and make a mark in the global world. So I know some of them have already done, like SP Jain and all have done. Amit Birla Institute has done on a very limited scale, but they should do it at a much wider scale, at a much larger scale. So it should be both ways.
No, you're very rightly, you're just bang on, because, this whole, the whole idea of inviting foreign university is, so that, the students can learn, get that foreign tag, as one of our speakers had very rightly point out, and then probably innovate in your own country. So you get the global exposure, innovate, and I think it's also one of the mandates of NEP that high performing Indian universities can also set up their extensions abroad, apart from, having foreign universities here. Because all of us do agree on one important fact here, that education is the key to Atmanirbhar.
Madhuji, I will just make a small point here. Okay. See, whenever we talk of, change of this market structure, be it manufacturing or now in education, if you recollect, all of us, when we were young, we used to wear HMT watches. Okay. Our parents as well. And their logo was timekeepers to the nation. And their own time is bad now. So what does it tell us? Okay, it tells us that if we don't embrace, okay, how far we can avoid? Do we have any choice? Okay, so the question is, even by inviting foreign university, what are we doing? Okay, it is going to empower, okay, our own resources in the time to come, and we can't ignore them. If we want to go outward, as I think Mr. Sandeep has said that our Institute of Eminence should go out, how can we say that you are not welcome and we want to go overseas? So the question is, it is a two-way, kind of a thing. So you really cannot, yes, what kind of precautions are to be taken, policy matters, discussions, those things are which can be taken care of. But if we say outrightly, okay, that this should not be allowed, then probably, our this Atmanirbharta, whatever we are saying, is it is only leveraging the local domestic resources to the advantage and embracing the global practices. It is not just avoiding the foreign competition.
Yeah,
That's my
absolutely. Absolutely. No, you're very right, Professor Datta. Can I go on to, there is one more question which I read here in the chat box, and then we can just throw it open, the audience can ask. The second question is, why industry prefers to visit only top premier institutions for campus recruitment? While the fact is that if students from tier 2 or tier 3 schools and cities are given a chance, they can probably prove themselves better than IIMs, IT on, a basic ground level performance. So comments, I think the industry needs to comment on this.
Yeah, Dr. Madhu,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah. No, sure, Sandeepji. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is a very good question and very valid. And as part of Samsung, I would just clarify that you see, we do there is a annual contest we do across the country for all institutions, whether it is tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Now, who has made this tier 2 or a tier 1 or a tier 3 kind of a this thing? It's not we have made it. It is basically providing opportunity where we go out to all the campuses, invite students to participate in a contest, and when institutes like IIM Ahmedabad or a Lucknow or a Bangalore, Calcutta are competing with MICA or a SIBM, and MICA winning the contest, then I think it goes to the caliber of the students from all these institutes where they compete in a equal platform and still come out winners as compared to say a Ahmedabad or a Calcutta or a Bangalore. So I think fair opportunity is given as far as my company is concerned, and we try to make it as democratic as possible.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Sandeep. Thank you, Sandeep ji. Yes, we could hear from Shalu or Harjeet ji. Yeah.
Suppose, Professor Madhu, if you have to buy vegetables, where will you go? You will go to the local grocery store or you will go to the mall, right?
Local also. Yeah.
Or you will go to another city to buy grocery.
No, honestly. And we all go for branded stuff, so I cannot see anything there. Yeah.
So, point is, like you said, there is a brand value, there is convenience, and there is discounts. Now, what happens is how this entire thing has started. If we understand the whole piece, why tier 2, tier 3 schools are important, because they are flexible. Suppose I want to do a tie-up for preparing students for some skills which I need. I can come to a tier 2 school which is close to my vicinity, talk to them, work out an arrangement, and that's how industry and academia collaborates. If you see a broader view, when TCS started IT industry, so TCS started with IITs, and they used to pick up full batch of IITs. The batch used to be 300, and all the people gone to TCS, 270 out of 300. Then they found we can't sustain on IITs. So what they did was they started going to all the engineering colleges. The demand was such that they could not, all the engineering colleges also were not able to feed. Then what they did was they started a graduate program and they started going to graduate uh, schools. Look, when an industry is growing, it needs a lot of people, and that is why so many educational institutes have been created as per policy, because we want certain industries to grow. And this package of Atmanirbhar Bharat, which is there, it is talking about strengthening certain industries. We are talking about coir industry strengthening, toy industry strengthening. We are talking about chemicals. We are talking about steel. So jobs are going to get created in this space, whether we will be able to supply talent there or not. Because when this volcano erupts, at that point in time, this much talent will be required. This is a phase, like when with this mindset, this whole thing was opened and a lot of MBA colleges came up. And after that, you would have seen that many of them actually went away also. They deregistered themselves because they were not able to sustain. One is they started like a business. How? Okay, we will take money from people, whether we add value or not, and we will get the job. That is not what the purpose is. If you are adding value and the demand is growing, then each and everyone gets a fair chance. And I believe the way he was saying, most of the companies have stopped going to campuses and they are conducting all India exams. And what they are doing is they are saying compete along with others. In fact, most of the big organizations do all India exam and ask people to participate in those exams rather than going to a select few campuses. That has been the trend, and I believe that is going to continue. So everyone will have an equal opportunity, and like the question said, I personally feel there is no difference in terms of quality of students from an IIT or a person who is studying in, say, any other engineering college. So this A, B, and C is like a caste system which we only have created, which is actually no longer relevant.
Amazing. Miss Shalu, any thoughts on this? If you are there.
I think Harjeet and Sandeep have said it right. I personally just believe merit always will shine. So we should worry less about which institute we come from. We should worry more about what can I do to make sure that I know my concept so well, I understand the context of how to apply that knowledge, and given an opportunity, I am able to make points that matter. So beyond, they always say 99% hard work, 1% destiny. For 1% destiny, we can do nothing about. But 99% hard work is dependent on us. So worry less about where you come from. Worry more about once you are there, what can you do to make the most of that opportunity and shine? And then invest in yourself to be better every time. So we will all fail. We have all reached where we have reached in our life by making mistakes. One failure, one mistake is not permanent. Take it as a learning, keep moving forward, and keep refining your own self. So chase excellence in yourself and you will shine. And that 1% destiny will come when the time is right. So stop worrying about tier 1, tier 2. I think organizations are waking up to the fact that we should create a fair platform for everybody to come in and compete. And that's what Sandeep and Harjeet are talking about. So I fully agree with the fact.
No, absolutely. Having looked after placements at FMS for many years, yes, there is always this. My students would come to me and say, "Ma'am, this company is going to IMA and not coming to me, not coming to FMS. What can we do about it?" To put it very squarely and rightly, there is a certain heads-on advantage you do get when you are from a Premier B school, because you get exposed to those companies. But after that, very rightly said, it's about your hard work and how you sustain your job. Because if the corporates are paying you that X amount, everybody demands maybe 10x or 20x in return. So that's about the kind of message we would like to give.
Dr. Vij, I'll just add one thing.
Yeah.
I have done my MBA from distance learning while I was working. So from IMT Ghaziabad, I did weekend classes to complete my MBA while I was working with GE and then Genpact. The point I want to make is I look at my 20 years of career and I don't think I lacked opportunities because I did not come from a full-time MBA college. So all I'm saying is worry less about where and how you get started. But once you get started, try and make the most of what you have. It really doesn't matter after a point in time, you know, which institute, which college, what kind of mediums you use, your own ethics, values, and experiences will shine. So don't be overwhelmed by why a previous school gets advantage. They will, as Dr. Vij, you said rightly. Some colleges will always get an advantage, and what Harjeet said was very true. If I have 10 positions to fulfill versus 1,000 positions to fulfill, and I have less time, a corporate will take a decision to say, okay, which place might have a higher credibility, consistency in delivering quality talent to me. And I might start somewhere, right? But that's okay. You will, by the way, most of you students who are listening in, when you go to corporates, probably you will make those choices as well, because those are wise economic choices. So as students, worry less about wise economic choices corporates make. Worry about how will you shine through your hard work and make the most of opportunities you get your way. So that's how I will round up.
Absolutely, a great message for our young students, how to rebuild, regain, and get that confidence back. I don't see any questions in the chat box, so if there are no questions, keeping in view the time, we could log off. So before I log off, let me express my formal gratitude, sincere thanks to each one of our panelists for taking time off on a Saturday. And I'm completely grateful to all of you to be here, share your thoughtful insights, your thoughtful views. And I think each one of us has a lot to take away from this webinar. It's a privilege, it's an honor to have you all here, listen to you. And let me also really put it like this, that we could never have pulled off this event without the support of each one of you. So before we end, look forward to your continued support in making FWA a world-class kind of, an institution it is. So with this, let me close the session. And once again, my sincere thanks to each one of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.